Welcome and thank you again for being here today on the Pausecast. I'm super excited to be here today with my friend, my dear friend and EQ comrade, Wendy Chin. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes. Thank you for being here all the way from Ireland. And would you like to lead us in a pause before we get going?
I would love to. So, for me, when I think about pausing, it is absolutely that intentional shift. Now, the reality is sometimes you are not in a place. I'm sitting in my soundproof phone booth. That is very hard to do anything in here but take a moment. But so, normally, what I do are a couple of things. One, if I am in a meeting and it's not appropriate for me to take a mindful pause, I might just wiggle my toes. When I get nervous, I start to sweat and I start to get really hot. And the wiggling the toes just helps ground me. So that's one thing I do. Another thing, if no one was in my office and and I'm not a Swiftie, but I sometimes jog in place. Again, intentionally just trying to shake it off. And that's
Mhm.
genuinely, I would do that. Um, and then if I really am in a place where I have to take a larger pause, I might think about being on a boat and thinking about the water moving, and the movement of the boat just allows me to breathe. Sometimes it puts me to sleep, but that's not a bad thing. So that's what
Mhm.
I do.
Thank you. I like that you have three choices for yourself and you
I
can choose
do
either
have
one of
three
them.
choices,
And I'm gonna
depending on
wiggle my
where I
toes.
am.
It depending on the situation, which
Yeah,
is important as a pause as any intentional shift in behavior. It has to work for you. So yeah, if you're not in a place where you're going to imagine you're on a boat and visualize that, it's really challenging and therefore you can do something different.
yeah,
I am going to wiggle my toes right now. You will never know it because they're here without the camera under the
yeah,
desk.
yeah.
But, I do wiggle my toes myself when I come out of a little bit of a little breathing exercise or meditation, and I love it because it kinda brings me back into my body and grounds me, so thank you for that. I like that. So, tell us a little bit about you, Wendy. I know you are a EQ coach. Would you like to
Yeah.
share how you got started in that and what you do?
Yeah. I would love to. So, way back when, I met an amazing colleague named Rachel. We met when we were doing our EQ training, when Daniel Goleman, father of emotional intelligence, decided to give us a cameo. That was really cool. We were
That
in
was
Vienna.
very cool. In Vienna, Austria, which was pretty fantastic. I met a lot of great people there, and it was just pretty epic since it was for me, I was across the world, and I know for you it wasn't too far, but, it was a beautiful setting in that wonderful retreat center in the middle of Austrian countryside.
Yeah. So that's really where, that's when I started my EQ journey. I'm originally from California. So Rachel and I share a number of California kind of high fives, exactly. But living in Ireland now. So my story very much is my career has always been in HR, in executive search and recruiting, and also in executive coaching. So that's really what I do. And because EQ is my passion, I absolutely bring my EQ into coaching, but I also bring EQ into my executive search practice.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful, and I love that you're an EQ fellow EQ lover, EQ coach as I am, and, when you say that, because I think a lot of folks have different ideas around that.
Mm.
For you, how does that work for you with executives and just coaching? Because I know you also hire for leaders too. So let's first talk about the emotional intelligence aspect of coaching. Like for you, what does that entail when you've got an executive and they're like, "Hey, I need some EQ coaching." Like what does that mean?
Sure. So, from a coaching perspective, particularly if there's a need around EQ, normally I'm working with director level candidates and above who are looking to broaden their enterprise influence. They tend to be a really good functional leader, as I call it, an I, but they are trying to become a T and they're possibly stuck. They can see the next level, but they just can't seem to get there. So, what I do is I work with them particularly focusing on their EQ skills to help them understand more about themselves, number one, from a self-awareness perspective, but also then lean into what are the EQ skills that they can develop, so they can broaden that influence and really achieve what they are looking to achieve.
That's so powerful. And I know now that we're in this world of the 24/7 and always on, and now there's AI, and what is that impacting everyone for those skills of being in the awareness and the human side, I feel like now are more important than ever so we can continue to stay focused and do the work we need to do. You mentioned become a T. What does T stand for?
Yeah. So if you think about your own career development, right? So it's really common as a graduate, you're
Yeah.
building these skills and you're kind of going up the ladder. But what happens at a career point, and it depends on the size of your organization and level and all your career aspirations. But sometimes when you want, and this is the T, when you're looking to grow larger, where you're looking at more of an enterprise, kind of almost that ability to do cross group collaboration, right?
Mhm.
That's when the delegation happens. That's when you have to almost influence without authority, right? So as an I am the functional leader. And of course, everybody below me is going to listen to me because I'm their leader.
Yeah.
But it's so much harder. And that's that career pivot that I see functional leaders really struggle with. They want to get bigger, but they don't know how to influence without authority. How do they tell someone to do something when they don't own the function, or they're in a different geo, or they're in a different
Yeah.
group altogether? That's the space where it becomes really interesting and really fun. And for me, that's what I'm super passionate about, helping those particular leaders grow their EQ.
Awesome. And when you hire for so being a recruiter, when you hire for EQ, can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what you look for? Like what matters if you're looking for a role right now or a job? And EQ has been one of the number one leadership qualities across the board for now a while, like
Yeah.
top two or three, right? In terms of candidates that companies are looking for. So tell us a little bit about what gets on your radar, what lets a candidate stand out.
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right, Rachel. So EQ has been on the radar. It's been on the top, skill list for the World Economic Forum. And again, even in 2025, it hit the top five, right? It talked about resilience. It talked about flexibility, agility. Those three things are the number two, right? So
Mhm.
number three, leadership and social influence. And number five, motivation and self-awareness. So that's pretty cool. If you're an EQ person or looking to grow your EQ or even have high EQ, those are the things that people look for. So it's should be no surprise then when I'm working with executive teams and say, okay, and I've got lots of examples to share, one one C level organization that I was working with in Western Europe. The CEO said to me, Wendy, I really need somebody with high EQ. And as part of my due diligence, I went around the table with his leaders and I said, okay, so tell me, what's needed here. We're hiring for X. And I said, your CEO is looking for somebody with high EQ. Every time I said that, every senior leader around the table said, really? And I said, yeah. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I really wasn't sure.
No, it's
And
so
each
intriguing.
of the leaders said, I'm so glad he said that. And I said, why? And he said, because he doesn't have EQ, high EQ. Super glad he knows he needs it. And I was like, really? So what was really interesting then is that I was able to go to market and be very open and say, look, the CEO is at least aware that he doesn't have high EQ. So we need to make sure we surround him with leaders who do. So that was an example of one. So when I look to hire senior leaders with emotional intelligence, it's the self-awareness, right? It is
Yeah.
the agility, right? The ability to be adaptable, to be able to pivot. Now, that might sound quite simplistic. But the reality is, and particularly, and maybe not so much from a US focus, but I see this a lot in Europe, where you might have people who have been in their careers in the same company for 10, 15, 20 years, that's really hard because those leaders don't know anything else but that environment. So I like to look and work with candidates, clients who are adaptable, who have shifted different industries where they've had to learn to adapt and how to pivot their skills, how to pivot into new environments where they have to influence without authority. They
Mm,
don't, they may not know everybody at all. So some of the things that I look for, but
yeah,
definitely self-awareness, definitely the agility, the ability to influence and get things done in the right way without, I suppose, leaving dust behind where you've stumbled over
yeah,
everybody the way to get
yeah.
there.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining that to us. And I think that's spot on where awareness is a big thing. And it's interesting because I feel like, I mean, my sense is, and you let me know if you agree, where if you've gotten a certain level, so you're an executive, you've climbed the ladder, you're already doing really well, like you needed to have some awareness to get there. And I feel like that's such a relevant topic, relative topic rather, where someone might think they're really intuitive or aware, and yet they're completely still amiss in some area, but they don't know that. And how do you know if you don't know?
Yeah,
Do you feel like that happens sometimes in the senior leadership's box? And like, how do
completely.
you like what happens when that happens? Because you have someone's like, no, I'm totally aware, and then they're just not as aware as you think that they might be.
I have tons of examples. As an example, this morning, I was working with a director level candidate who whose organization has rapidly grown, like most tech, right? Growing so big that they can't keep up with themselves. And this particular director level candidate was struggling with another function. And so I walked the client or the coachee, my client, I walked them through kind of that emotional intelligence framework. And the one piece, just to your point around the self-awareness, my client had no visibility or awareness that they had a real blind spot. So I suppose they have worked in this organization, to give you more context, for a while, and they had developed, as I called it, or I call it, an armor. So my client put on an armor to deal with this other function because there was some residual challenges over the years. And I asked my client to change perspectives, right? Think a
Yeah.
little bit about empathy. And my client really struggled. I can't give that person empathy. I can't change perspectives. No, 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 no. They are totally wrong. And so I gave the analogy to my client just this morning. And I said, it feels like you have an armor on. How does that feel to you when I say that? How does that resonate?
Mhm.
And she looked at me and she goes, hmm. And I said, and I could just see it, I could feel it. And she said to me, that analogy really hits home. And I said, how
Yeah.
come? And she said, because I find it interesting that I can't give that other team empathy. And that's because I won't take the armor off. And I said,
Wow.
okay, wow. Okay, so go with that for a moment. What if you took that armor off? And she went like this. I feel naked and vulnerable. And I said, okay, would that allow you to be potentially a little bit more empathetic or aware of what's happening on the other side of the table? And her face just changed. And it
Yeah.
was so interesting and so exciting. And I got shivers and said, wow, that's why I
Yeah.
love this work.
That's a profound moment, and why I believe coaching and having that outside lens from another person can be so powerful because you really don't know. What a wonderful example. Thank you for sharing that. That happened today. I can't even imagine. You have probably a plethora of other examples, but that's such a good one. Thank you for sharing that. And it just speaks to how guarded we can be, and the awareness piece can expand once we take the armor off, or if we even know what we could be doing differently, it can change everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question for you. Would you be up for
Sure.
doing some myth busting around emotions at work?
Why not?
So
Why not?
I thought this would be fun because I just thought of this as you were speaking. So we haven't talked about this yet. So we'll just go with it. What I think about, and I think I see this in my clients, and I'm wondering if you see it in yours, where there's a lot of so one myth that I think about is there is no place for emotions at work. True or false? Is
I
that a
love
true myth?
that. I love
Okay.
that. You know why I smile is because I was just giving an emotional intelligence talk just 2 weeks ago called Leading from Inside Out. And I did that with the audience. I said, myth or fact?
Oh, no kidding.
No kidding. No kidding. Um,
You asked
so
that same question.
I asked that exact same question.
Well, I'm working on my intuition, so there you go. Okay.
How did you know? How did you know? You must have seen my slides.
No, I didn't. I just picked up on this in the field. There you go.
Yeah. And so obviously for the audience, is it myth or fact?
Yeah. Well,
So
what was the answer?
so the audience told me it was a myth. So, because you said, right, should you not show your emotions
So they got it right.
at work, right? And I said, yeah, it is a myth. Now, what I did tell them, a very personal story, is that when I was 15 in the Bay Area, I used to work with my grandmother, who was 50 years older than me, my first summer job when I was in high school. And this is a fact, right? She told me, now remember, she's 50 years older than me. She told me, Wendy, never show your emotions at work. Never.
Mm. Wow.
Never show your emotions at work. Never let your team know what you're thinking. And I idolized my grandmother. Now she's since gone, but I idolized her. I still have shivers. And that one comment from her, now she's well gone, but that one comment with her stayed with me up until about maybe 10 years ago. Okay. And I, as a leader, before I set up my own business, I thought that was the way to manage. And that one belief kicked me in the behind twice. When I was first leading, and then a second time, where I actually then had to realize, okay, you mean my team want to know my emotions? So in that second time, my team said to me, and I know if they were listening, they'd probably cringe because they did, but they said, gosh, Wendy would work so much better if she was in an office with her door closed because she never wants to let us in. She never wants to show her emotions. And yeah, I'm not sure she's a great leader. We did a 360. That feedback came back to me. And at that stage, I was commuting.
Mm.
And that was like a knife to the heart. A knife to the heart. But it was such an amazing lesson. So that's true. So myth
Yeah.
or fact? Yep. But that was a belief. That was a
Yeah.
belief that my 50-year-old, she was 50 years my senior,
Yeah.
told me.
Which was the norm
It
when
was
that
normal.
generation was working, right? Like, to me, that's how when I look at the '50s and the factories and the industry that was building after World War II, that was the norm. And like, to her credit, like, she was just doing what everyone else was doing. And I think that
Great management advice. That was
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Totally.
and, like, she doesn't know, right? Like, this is what we do, and now that we're in this mode of the knowledge economy, and we have to show up more as humans, I think, for this level of leadership required now, where we're working remote, we're working return to office, we're across the globe, we're 24/7. It's just a whole different game. That emotional quotient, the EQ, is imperative, and just a good example because I do think a lot of people have that same experience as you. I'm sure I had some variation of that myself. Not my grandparents, but like my parents probably said that to me at some point. I don't remember it, but it was something that you just kind of assumed it wasn't the case. And I mean, we're here to bust that myth because you can't be a successful manager without EQ or bringing your emotions to work. And that looks different for all of us, but the awareness piece is the first step. And thank you for busting that myth for us. Thank you. All right. Any other myths you want to bust on EQ? You're the one who did the talk of late earlier.
I
I don't even
know.
know.
Yeah, that was it. It was a great one. No, and I actually started with it, so I just laughed that
Yeah.
that was the one question you decide to say,
That is
right,
funny.
the fact.
Yeah. Well, here's one more, okay? Because this is,
Go for
I'm
it.
just thinking of these off the top of my head, but myth or fact, like it's okay to share, well, it's okay to ask someone else how they're feeling at work. Can you share that or can you ask that? Is that taboo? Like, how does that work?
I think that's totally appropriate.
Like, true. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I
true.
agree.
I
I
absolutely would. Yeah. So we go back
especially
to
yeah,
that client that I had this morning around the armor.
yeah,
Now, taking it, and I said, gosh, it really feels as if you're wearing armor. And, the full flip side of that is like, if you take it off, I'm naked. And I said, okay, well, you know, you're leaving me shortly. And I said, you've got to go back and talk to the rest of the exec team and so forth. It's up to you to determine what type of armor and how thick it really is, or what color the armor is. So going and talking about, can I share and ask somebody how they are? Absolutely.
yeah,
So we talked about vulnerability. And I think the work that Brené Brown is doing regarding, her last book, Strong Ground, um, I was fascinated in terms of
yeah,
where that vulnerability is. Now, for someone, as I shared, who spent the majority of my life not wanting to share my emotions and not doing that and learn to be vulnerable, that hasn't been easy at all. But then you add the EQ layer onto that and why it can be so impactful.
yeah,
It's just, it's kind of like um, it's opening up your heart. It's so contagious, actually. That's what I think when you do ask them, how are they?
yeah.
And you use that empathy and compassion. Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing Brene in, and one of my favorite authors and leaders who I also really appreciate that work because if we can be vulnerable, we let others allow them to be vulnerable. But if we take the lead on that, we can show up vulnerably first. It actually allows other people to lower their waterline or to be more vulnerable too. And that's really, really powerful. It just creates more trust. It creates people it helps people know you more as a leader too, which I think really matters these days in terms of building rapport and creating the trust in a well performing team and executive suite. Yeah. One more question for you, and I just thought of this one too.
okay.
Um, but so I work with tech leaders and you do too, right? There's a lot of tech execs out there. So a lot of times my experience is that these folks are incredibly bright. They're super, super intelligent, smart individuals who are very analytical. They are trained that way, right? They're engineers. They're they're data processors. So I find my challenge as a coach is helping them understand the value of allowing their emotional side to be part of their executive repertoire, so to speak. So, do you also experience that? And like for you as a coach, what do you do if you've got a really analytical client for them to help bring this emotional intelligence in, whether it's the awareness, whether it's the resilience, whether it's the empathy, like all of those things. Do you experience that? Is that happening over in Ireland?
Absolutely.
I
Gosh,
think it's all over the place. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it extends probably more than just tech, right? So I think from what I see on this side of the world, it's more so if you're wired to be more analytical, right? Whether you're in finance or whatever profession you're in, it's kind of more that mindset where you're really super, super analytical and you rely on data. right? Emotions are not data. And it's like, ooh, for the longest time, and this is when you and I first started doing EQ, it was, I talk to my L&D friends and they go, oh no, Wendy, we can't put EQ on our skills list because it's too soft. And I was like, wow, okay, it's too soft. Okay, not. But what I see for those that are analytical, and actually my client that I was with this morning, very analytical. And that's why that self-awareness and that empathy, when I asked the question, it was like a point blank, total blindsided, total lack of self-awareness in that space. So I suppose what I do, and it does take longer because they're potentially not as comfortable to go there. So I have another client that comes to my mind, and we've been able to do incredible work. And like that, he's very analytical. What he was able to do really quickly, initially was, and he said to me, he's like, Wendy, I don't like this. I feel uncomfortable. So he was able to admit in our confidential, session, I feel uncomfortable. This is making me feel really uncomfortable. Because I was asking him, how do you feel? Oh, you know, and I kept saying to him, I said, look, coaching is a gift, right? If you lean into it, and I know Sheryl Sandberg has said that so many times, and so maybe if you don't use that word, but if you really try to be open to it, what might happen? You never know. So it's trying to shift really strong analytical people to be open to it, right? It kind of goes back to our EQ training. If they have a more positive mindset, the art of possibility. Go back to the client this morning. As we were talking, I said, that sounds like a fixed mindset. What do you think? She said, totally fixed mindset. And I said, okay. So it's, and I actually think for those particularly who are not in tune with their own emotions or even their level of awareness, they do need a coach to just help them ask those questions, to reflect back what they may not be saying or may not be comfortable even feeling. So that's what I would say for my analytical clients. Trust
So
the process.
good.
Trust the
Thank you.
process.
Yeah, trust the process. Know that there's things you can lean into or be open to possibility. It's so powerful and good reminders for all of us. We got to wrap up here. So, where can people find you? Is there anything you'd like to share that maybe a free gift or something where people can know more about you?
I'd love to. Sure. One thing that might be helpful, as you know, I do both executive search and executive coaching. I've put together an interview guide for those who may be transitioning into something else. Be very happy to give that. It's not readily available on my website, but Rachel, I can give you the link.
I'm going to have a link for that then. So it's a guide to interview. That's right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. Any other last moment thoughts in terms of what you'd like to share, words of wisdom, or for anyone who's either looking to have more emotional intelligence, get a role in tech or anything else like that?
Mm. I think even just having the that uncomfortable creative tension that something needs to change. I think if you're feeling that and you're looking at something going, gosh, I could easily stay. There's been a whole slew of layoff roundups. Maybe I should just stay. But you sense that there's that creative tension within you. That's possibly the time to work with a coach, work with someone else to just get yourself ready and go on your own terms rather than being told. So that's what I would suggest, particularly just what all tech is continually going through.
Yeah, go on your own terms. Have on your own terms is so good. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for being here today. It was so great to be with you. Thanks for everything.
And thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening today to the Pausecast. You rock. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, leave your review. I'd love to hear from you and help us get the word out to all of those who are in search of wanting to get out of overwhelm and rise to their next level of leadership. If you think that you might benefit from these tools or know anyone else who would, just invite them to join us. Pausecast.